Sports professor Rick Horrow inside the $1.3 trillion business of sports. You're on the record. Morphed back 50 years ago, almost to the day, a neophyte kid just trying to get through Harvard Law School, but enjoying sports. Hockey fighting, criminal law, great topic. I proposed to a third-year criminal law professor for sponsorship, except two things, he said. There is no such thing as sports law, and if there was, we don't teach it. Well, a bet, a win, a squash game later, that's another story for another day, able not only to get the paper done, but start on my passion. And years later, by the way, 480 schools teaching sports law, business, administration, politics, and the like. And over 95% of the Big Five sports teams have sports lawyers directly or indirectly involved in them. Certainly has come a long way. I'm excited and honored to bring my Harvard law education and background in teaching to this business over the last 50 years. The books, Sport Business Handbook and otherwise. And most important, my dynamic partnership with SECON Sports Entertainment Innovation Conference every year in Las Vegas, but also other partners, USA Today, FinTech, and a few other exciting announcements to be done down the road. Bottom line is, the pandemic certainly changed the way we think about sports. Clearly the ultimate appointment viewing, but from the business, shared information, best practices, survival of the fittest, and creativity, and all of those issues are on display with some of the thought leaders you have heard from and will continue to hear from every week. A look back, a look forward, what are the trends, how do we survive and thrive from the pandemic? All of those issues brought to the table with some of my friends in the business who are the best and the biggest thought leaders. Have done it for years in the past, will continue to do so. Hopefully you will continue to join me. Thanks again. It's a big week, and a big week a couple of weeks ago and last week. NBA Finals, NHL Finals, a whole host of other major events. Women's Softball Championship in Oklahoma City. By the way, Oklahoma City, Thursday night, Game 1 of the NBA Finals and the Women's Softball Championship. What an honor for that community. They certainly built it with their MAPS plan. Anyway, let's get to it. The opening drive, the five biggest issues the last couple of weeks. Number one, obviously Pacers Thunder for NBA folks. I know it's small market, reminds people of Syracuse and Fort Wayne, but yet look at the efficiency. The Pacers, by the way, $169 million on their 2024-25 roster payroll, ranking 18th. The Thunder, $165, $5 million under the apron and the luxury tax threshold. Take a look at, for example, the Phoenix Suns. Their number was $214, and they didn't sniff the playoffs. Bottom line is, money can't buy happiness, but it sure really is good to manage around the money going into Game 1. Major issues for the NBA and small markets and good management. That's number one. Number two, Max Verstappen is called by other people in the industry, like Lando Norris, as pulling a Mario Kart maneuver. He gets a 10-second time penalty. He's a point short of suspension, which would be a major blow not only to him, but the Formula One industry, as he has been the superstar, but he's close to the edge. That's number two. Number three, the Big 12 conference and Commissioner Brett Yormark. He's talking about what is driven by the SEC and the Big Ten, a 5+11, 16-team playoff. What he says in his Orlando meetings is, we'll go for it, but let's make sure those two conferences act responsibly as they put together a structure we can all live with. And oh, by the way, he's also talked about suspending the Big 12 private equity exploration, not because it's the right idea, but they want to look at the redone and reimagined financials as they see what the 16-team playoff might look like. Certainly good management on Brett's part. That's number three. Number four, stadium hunts. Illinois Governor Pritzker talks about what he may do. He's saying no, no, no to public funding. However, the Bears hire a consultant that looks like they're fairly close to what public funding may mean. And two states down in Missouri versus Kansas, the Royals as well as the Chiefs are looking at $3 billion in total infrastructure for their two-stadium plan. At the end of the day, Kansas against Missouri. A very important strategy a few years ago when we looked at how to do a NASCAR track that ultimately ended up in Kansas. And this may be the same kind of issue, except two economic impact drivers, two stadiums. That's number 4. Number 5, Yasiel Puig, guilty plea overturned by federal courts. Puig doesn't uphold his end of the bargain. They say throw it out. Let's see what happens at trial. At the end of the day, the government tries to use his statement in a trial and in discovery and everywhere else. And the court says, if you throw out the plea, you can't use what he said after the plea. However, this is not the end of the Yasiel Puig story. And that's number 5. Well, take a look at all of the issues defined in this week's opening bell and opening drive. Well, we see money, money, money. We had a great interview and a great opportunity to pick the mind of an old friend who is one of the gurus in the sports marketing space. Mike Robichaud, the senior guy at MasterCard for a decade and a half. He ran global marketing, SVP of global sponsorships for MasterCard, MLB, NFL, PGA, rugby, UEFA. And at the end of the day, the guy that first put together a division that focused on baseball, hockey, tennis, other sports. He should be lauded for his professionalism, his vision, his consistency. He's now the chief strategy officer of a company called SportsBiz. They're talking about deep sports solutions, AI, and another group of getting out ahead of the business in a entity or an industry that's about $144 billion in the U.S. sports sponsorship market. By 2034, it's going to be bigger. Mike Robichaud knows the issues, very, very visionary on all of these concepts. Here is Mike now. Sports Professor Rick Horrow, inside the $1.3 trillion business of sports. We're talking about an area and with a guy that had a profound effect on a substantial amount of that money, and we even bring more money into the fold, from beginnings as a civil engineering major to one of the most prolific sponsorship experts in the world, and a good friend, Mike Robichaud. How's that for an intro?
That's great. Thank you. Great to see you, Rick.
Yeah, absolutely. Great to see you too. So you go to VMI and you get a civil engineering degree and then an MBA from William & Mary. Did we ever assume during those stages that you would end up kind of guiding the world of global sports sponsorship?
Definitely not. I didn't even know what marketing was. I was the classic, did okay in math, so you go become an engineer. And it wasn't until I got to business school that I even knew there was things more than being an engineer.
Well, and being an engineer is very important because it gives you another perspective, as all of these perspectives for you. But, growing up and years ago, the idea of a sponsorship was finding a guy whose ego fit with that golf game to deliver a sponsorship. The world has really come a long way, hasn't it?
It's unbelievable how much it's changed. And if you look at ownership and just all the changes going on, it's really incredible.
So 9 years at Sprint Nextel, new product development. I guess it gave you some real perspective on not only to see what works and what doesn't, but what could be sold and accepted and what couldn't.
Definitely. Look, that was great. The next 2 years were awesome. We were a young startup company, kind of fighting our way, fighting the big guys, and working on the product was awesome. I got to learn the business and understand what we were trying to do, what the impacts of consumers were, how sales worked, how a company functioned. So it was just, I really got to see a lot of things, and it was kind of high profile anytime we launched a new product, right? New phones were the big sexy thing when they came out each time. So yeah, that was a lot of fun. That was a great company to work for.
Yeah, of course. And as you cut your teeth getting ready for the bigger kahuna at MasterCard, you must have understood that the more you knew about a particular business, the better it was going to be to adapt the sport marketing techniques to it.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, I think back then that was one of the days of starting where sponsorships weren't, I don't want to say they were ever generic, but they started really being much better tailored. A brand really tried to say, hey, I don't want to just be a sponsor and hang signs and take some customers. I need to really adapt it for my business. And, as I got to know my peers and saw what they were trying to do, whether it was pouring rights or automobiles or whatever, we all needed to morph our sponsorship. So if you didn't understand what your business was or the purpose was or the goals were, you both struggled from building the right portfolio, but also being adopted internally, which is a huge thing if you're on the corporate brand side, is getting the internal organization to work with you.
If I put all the parts on a table, would you be able to build a cell phone from the inside out?
Once back then, probably. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
They were. I did get to go see them made. They used to be made in the U.S., and I would go down and watch the plant down in Florida be made. And I think they could make. They were somewhere about 5 every 2 or 3 minutes. It was pretty wild to watch. So it was very interesting.
I bet you your civil engineering background allowed you to understand a little bit more than most normal lay human beings as far as the process was concerned.
It did a little bit. My electrical engineering professor certainly would never have let me picked up anything and touch the phone. But no, look, I think when you're an engineer and you have the background, it's you're a little comfortable in the technical space. You're a little comfortable asking questions, and I think anybody who's done any sort of anything well in their life realizes once you get to that point where you're just okay asking questions and understanding, hey, I don't understand this, will you help me? But I guess I was okay at asking the right questions and being just comfortable enough in the room to raise my hand and learn from there.
All right, let's morph to 2001 because I think it's a very significant development. The bio says you basically started the first national sports and entertainment sponsorship department. Gutsy at the time, successful. Now everybody kind of does that. What was your thinking at the time, and how hard was it to get done?
Well, I was thinking how fortunate I was that my boss, Mark, who I still talk to these days, a wonderful guy, that he realized we had gotten to the point as the CMO that we had gotten to the point in our business development and growth that it was time to be able to do that and diversify what we were doing. So he did the first deals with Major League Baseball and the NHL. And I was fortunate enough, he moved me into the role to run that. And yeah, really from there, we had a lot to learn. We were very fortunate. We hired a great agency to come in and teach me and teach us how to get it organized. And we had great partners at the NHL and MLB. But yeah, we were young and small and just getting started. But those were great places to start.
Well, but also as far as the relationships go, it says that not only the MLB and NHL, NFL, USTA, but Sony Pictures and Disney. So you cut across sports into entertainment.
We did, yeah. That was actually really fun. We worked with a very different prior version of CAA, but we worked with them on the entertainment side, and we got into movies. Right, that was a big thing, product placement, and we did have kind of a unique looking phone, so we wanted to be in as many relevant things that we could do. But then starting to do some movie promotions and understanding how if you work with the films and help promote them, it helped us with retail, which was becoming new for us, and also you started getting the adjacency of the talent through the movie. But yeah, that was a lot of fun. We did a few different things with some really good partners.
You're known not only as old, and I'm kidding, but experienced, but as a
Wise.
wise, but a young, modest,
Yes.
and wise, and a mold breaker. I mean, for example, to be able to do product placement with a phone in a movie. Today, you can't watch a movie without that, but it must have been very difficult to conceptualize it, value it, and sell it back then.
It was interesting. The one that I remember having the most fun with was we work with Law and Order, and I remember meeting with and I'm sorry, his name's escaping me right now, the man who created it and owns it. But I met with him, and he was very particular that it needed to be authentic, and he was probably the first person that really taught me about authenticity and how much that mattered. And we explained to him that law enforcement and many groups like that were big users of our product. And so, because we had the push to talk, direct connect back then. So the fact that he would say, hey, if this is how it's being used in real life and I want my show to be as authentic as possible, then I'm happy to work with you and integrate you. So it was more than just cutting a deal. It was really understanding it from a creative point of view, getting into the stories, which was great.
So let's fast forward to about 2008, 2009. You start your 15 plus year career with MasterCard, most of it as the senior vice president for global sponsorships. At the heyday, you had 100 people working for you in 5 business regions. Did you ever think that the sports sponsorship world would be as big and world encompassing as it had become under your direction?
No, not really. And in fact, one of the big things you went right to global is one of the reasons I wanted to go to a company, and MasterCard was, was had just gone public, was to get in some international experience. Being in the telecom space, for anybody that knows, in the U.S., for the most part, if you're in telecom, it's a U.S. based business. And I wanted some of that international global experience. And MasterCard I was very fortunate to go there and to all of a sudden have my eyes open to, much bigger, not just sports or things, but things that crossed over many more borders, had to deal with languages, had to deal with different cultures, and that was fascinating. And then if you look today, how the NFL is going to Europe and football, soccer is coming here. It's look, the Olympics was always that kind of main international event that people looked at, but there's so many other things now, and obviously television and production has evolved considerably. So all those things that have come together, it's unbelievable to think you can be a fan of virtually anything, and live anywhere and be a fan of something else.
So market.us, and I've seen a lot of these studies, and you can plug numbers and pick them any way you want. But the number that I've seen that seems to be most realistic is that the international sports sponsorship market is at about $145 billion US by 2034, and CAGR about 10% increase from 25 to 33. Pretty prolific. It may not be that number, but we know the industry is growing by leaps and bounds, and you were in a position to be ahead of your time with a global company.
Yeah, I mean, look, what we've all known, and now we're just seeing, is how much content or entertainment, whatever words we want to use for it. The reality is what people do and what draws their attention and their fandomness. And sports is that universal. And once the mold started breaking years ago, where you had different forms of entertainment, then you got into reality TV, and you got to all these other areas, and then the idea that sport is so universal. It was appointment viewing. It was if you were a fan, you dedicated your time, energy, money. You only have so many hours in the day, so many passions you can do, and sports just commands that. And it always has been, and it's only growing today. And that's what people just realized. That's why if you look at the upfronts last week, everything's now being led by sports, and it used to be led by primetime TV.
Yeah, we're going to get into sport biz and how marvelous a concept and a company it is in just a minute. But the key question to segue into that is valuation. You had a chance to deal with at MasterCard, baseball, football, PGA, rugby, UEFA, etc. When does it come a time where the corporation understands they are happy with their return on investment? You've got to keep them happy, clearly, but happy ought to involve ROI, and it needs to involve brand awareness. And you were formulating your own opinion on what that means as you continued to run the sponsorship piece of the company.
For sure. I mean, listen, anybody who's on the brand side knows these were always kind of big decisions, but they were also very visible. Now they're very big decisions. But look, CFOs, CMOs, boards of director, they all want to know these questions. These are allocation of limited resources. I don't care how big a company you are. But for me, I was very fortunate to start it back when we kind of skipped over at Nextel, when we did the NASCAR deal, which was really the game changer. Is we realized very quickly, again, the CMO Mark was like, hey, we need to measure this. We need to figure out some way to understand the value of what we're doing. I started learning about databases and how we could keep track of those things. And we were actually able to prove. Now, that was also the advent of another technical change, which was, people may not remember this, but cell phones didn't always have geolocations. That was actually mandated by the government for 911 services. Well, every wireless company turned that into some sort of marketing value. Well, we were able to use it for measurement, and we were able to use it and show the return of investment that we got on our NASCAR deal. And so as any business is looking, they want to understand the return, of course. They want to understand that their resources being used well. I think enlightened ones also say, well, if it's working so well, if I gave you more money, would you be able to grow the business even more? And then it always came down to, what decisions are you making, and how do you know what decision to make, and how do you know what to pay?
So everybody, great segue. Everybody knows in the industry that Robichaux's chops and credibility are far, wide, deep, unquestioned. And I'm not blowing smoke. You're the best, and you're maybe the only creative guy in that space. I'll say it. You don't have to. Your ability to then take what you've learned and be part of a new company is unparalleled. Therefore, tell us about Sports Biz.
Yeah, we're building what we like to think will be the most advanced analytics company in the sponsorship space. We want to help brands measure and make better decisions. There's a few other folks out doing that, but we think we have a few twists and turns that we look at as far as how we incorporate design. Look, brands, are complicated. A lot of people think that I would make a decision on a sponsorship, which was rarely the case. It was usually a company decision all the way up to executives. But then when it came to the activating part, I had other folks. I had salespeople that I had to understand it from a hospitality, but I had brand people in the company that they were responsible. That's their main job. What are the brand standards? How do we represent ourselves? What's the color scheme? All those decisions that are made. And there hasn't been a lot of great analytics to help brands understand the impact. A lot of brand people, no fault of their own, but they don't go to stadiums. They may not be a fan of that sport. So they may think, well, if this is how the logo looks here or there, it'll just look fine in a stadium or some other application. And that may not be the case. So being able to provide analytics up to a CMO level that says, hey, not only do I know what it's worth from a value and from the position, but now I also see, am I maximizing and getting the most value out of those positions and how my brand's represented.
And I'll say it, and no offense to agencies, but nobody has the collective experience and the technical acumen. I know the company that you're now with touts deep sports solutions, and also the ability to integrate AI, a newfangled teammate in this whole world. How is this moving forward with all of these relative diverse parts?
Yeah, that's the part that's incredible, and I wish I was smart enough when I joined the company. But I've really been learning from Steve, our owner, since, and studying it a lot. Look, we all hear about AI, but you really do have to sit down and discipline yourself and understand what it means. But every company out there is either doing it or talking about doing it, and it's just a matter within what department. What I'm finding is it hasn't hit a lot of the marketing departments yet, or not all of them. I don't want to be judgmental, but the key is it's coming everywhere. And as I talk to everybody, whether it's a property, an agency, or another brand, is the key thing now is just say, hey, how can I use it? How can I use it to be more efficient? How can I make better decisions? How can I do it faster? Because it's coming now. I'd like to think we're going to be a part of that and a part of changing it, but there's other people that are doing it well. Generative AI for creative, all these things are going to impact the marketing ecosystem as we know it. And so we just want to be able to ultimately have that brand, look, they have a product, they have a service, and they want to sell it. And the paradigm of the old ways of doing things as they continue to change are going to need new tools and resources. And I would say the last thing is a lot of it's going to be self-serve. We look at a gentleman from Procter & Gamble a few years ago that said, far too long brands have ceded too much control up to third parties away from themselves, and that brands need to really regain their control. That was Mr. Pritchard, I believe, that said that. And we believe that. We believe brands are going to be doing things more in-house. It doesn't mean agencies are going away. It doesn't mean that sort of thing. It just means they're going to be different. And they all know it, and they're all working on it now, and the smart ones are ahead of it. So we just think there's going to be more self-service tools that either the brand or the agencies are going to use.
If you surveyed the growth of the industry post-COVID, I think one of the generalizations we can all agree on is that it's been survival of the fittest, but now people understand it's effectively cooperative environment. There's a lot of revenue and there's a lot of assets out there, but everybody's kind of get along, and it's not always a zero-sum game. In that context, you've got brands, agencies, teams, leagues, properties, and athletes. And with your new company, you've got to, in some way, appeal to all of them. How does that all work?
Yeah, 100%. And actually, that was one of the things we talked about as soon as I really started a few months ago. Is first of all, every brand has a different relationship. If they have an agency, they all have different relationships, and that's usually the DNA of the brand. So you can't look in and say, well, this is how I worked with mine, so that must be how everybody does it, because that's not the case. I think also brands and CFOs know this. Brand marketers, they love spending money. It's a part of what we do, and we believe a lot in marketing and what its role is. So what I think is going to happen is it's going to change, and it's going to morph how the spend happens. I actually think properties are going to benefit because you're going to have brands be more active. The money they save to be more efficient in certain areas, they're then going to be to use those resources and deploy them in other areas. For kind of one of the ways that brands talk about this, they talk about working dollars. And what a CFO would say is the fee you pay, yeah, you get value for it, but they would consider that kind of a non-working dollar because you don't get necessarily direct visual benefit to promote your business. And then you've got your working dollars. I think what you're going to see is you're going to see the non-working dollars maybe go down some, not that fees will go down, but other expenses you have that you don't necessarily see. And then you're going to have more working dollars. You can advertise more. You can do more hospitality. If you have 3 MLB teams, maybe you'll have 7. So I think properties are going to benefit because they're going to have happier sponsors because they're going to get maximum value. Agencies are going to benefit because their clients are going to do more. They're going to be more active in more places. And the brands are going to benefit because they just know they're more efficient and they're getting more value. So actually, it's going to be different, but I do think it's not necessarily a negative. It's just going to be changed how people do things.
All right, so you're sitting in a creative room, wherever that is, either with alcohol flowing or businesses. We'll leave that to the imagination. When does the trade-off, the traditionalism, stop as far as preserving the existing structure of a sport versus the understanding that corporations and partners may want new forums and opportunities for advertising? An example is the 100 million or so generated by the NHL as they define jersey patches. Other examples abound, but where's that line and how do you deal with it?
I think consumers, it's really up to the consumer, right? If you're a good marketing, you always start with the consumer, and the consumers are understanding the landscape, and they understand that brands have a need to advertise their products. I think it's all we always would say, are you doing it authentically? Are you doing it in a way that you really want to enhance the fan experience? Is the fan somehow getting some kind of benefit from a marketer being there? If it's more, from a visual, from a patch or some other form of advertising, I think as long as it's done right, done tastefully, we've all seen it. It hasn't been, overnight. It's kind of morphed in. We see what's going on with college sports where they have a need for revenue. But I think, look, fans are pretty smart these days. They understand that money's always been a part of sport, and as long as the brands do it in a way that's that engages them well, gives them ideally something for it. I think you're just going to continue to see it as long as it can be absorbed into the system. Technology is still going to continue to evolve. We know digital is going to keep changing. Signage is changing. When you start thinking globally, you're going to see sports present themselves differently. The sport itself may be the same, but the brands are going to get presented differently in different countries. You'll be in character, you'll be in language, you may be sponsors that are locally relevant. So all that stuff's going to keep changing and evolving, and that really should be good for everybody.
Should be good for everybody, and hopefully people are most creative as to how to approach that being good for everybody. Business brand value, you look at some of the numbers, Nike's brand value, some say is at 650 million. Adidas, Emirates, Santander, Red Bull, top 5, people say all over $100 million in brand value. What's the most important aspect of the brand value? Is it the asset, the inventory, the kind of relationships that are generated, the hospitality? Is it a combination of all of that? Where's it come from?
Well, look, a brand's number one asset's likability. At the end of the day, everybody does business with people they like and brands they like. So is it likable? I think then as you go down from there is what are the characteristics of that brand that attract an audience? Is it adventuresome? Is it culturally pushing the envelope? Is it conservative? Right? We see financial services obviously different than other things. You don't want to look too risky if you're financial services as an example. But look, brands build really all for that consideration and ultimately decision. We say consideration is important, but ultimately it doesn't matter if you consider me. It only matters if you actually you follow it up with a purchase and build some sort of loyalty to it. But that's what they're always trying to build, and they're always trying to protect is to make sure that brand health is there.
Couple more. AI, dangerous or necessary?
Inevitable. It's coming. I think we all have seen so many other technologies come in our life. People worried about wireless cell phones back in the day. We're worried about driverless cars, all sorts of stuff. I would say we trust those that are thinking about it and smart. We hope our friends in the government have smart people thinking about it. But look, it's coming, and I think the more people know about it, I think the danger is not understanding it and just getting overwhelmed and saying, "Well, that's too hard. It's too smart for me. I can't handle that." I think that would be the danger. But it's gonna come. It already is. I mean, it's in so many ways we just don't know it, and it's helping us. I mean, it helps in the payments industry. It helps in the gaming industry. There's so many places we're seeing it and living it. We just don't know it. But I think people would be best benefit by at least having some general understanding of the vocabulary and how it works.
All right, so this one is interesting. Your corporate brand. What is the next big thing you sponsor? Is it a blimp? Oh, no, Rick. That's years ago. Is it a second base? No. We tried that. What's the next big thing?
That's always a good one. It used to be that, like you said before, the strong survive and the strong get bigger. But I also think the world's becoming more diversified from a sense of what people can handle, and a lot of that has to do with the ability to distribute content differently. David Hill is getting a Lifetime Achievement Award this week, very well deserved. And I think I have this right. If bringing the Premier League to the U.S. years ago, a lot of people are like, that's not going to work. What's he thinking? There, David goes again. But the reality is, it's unbelievable. And I think you look at bringing a sport, and now look, the NBA has been way ahead of it, going to Asia. Hockey's already global, and I think they're doing so many smart things. That Four Nations was incredible. One of the best things we've seen this year. So I think it's the globalization, it's the crossing over, and I think as long as the fans can understand it and absorb it, and I'd be remiss, how could I not talk about women's sports? I got to spend a lot of time my last few years at MasterCard working on that, and that's awesome. I mean, to be able to see where that's come, and really the way we at least looked at it was the professionalization of it. The fact that it's now a full-time job, a full-time career, and that these athletes can do what the male athletes have always done, which is they can train, they can sleep right, they can eat right, they can get all those things. So they're physically better, but they also become faster, better technically. And so that's why it's more popular. It's not that all of a sudden we thought it's a good idea. It's the sport is better. It's a better product. And that's why it's so entertaining and is standing on its own.
Finally, where is the business of sports branding / sponsorship / partnership in the next 10 years? And where is Robichaud in that?
Well, I hope we have a good run here at Sports Biz. I think we have a lot of ideas that Steve and the team are working on as far as where that stuff can go. But it's personalization, I think, is where it's going to keep going. I think the notion of delivering not just a mass advertising message to people in a mass way, but understanding who the audiences are. I heard one of the baseball teams down in Florida, how they're tailoring to different audiences, and whether it's a Hispanic audience or traditional U.S. audience, there's just so many different ways people are understanding and adapting to their audience. And then I think the technology will start allowing more of that delivery. That tell me, I'm not in the market for a new car, so don't tell me about cars, but tell me about something I am in the market for. And I just think you're going to have a lot more response and engagement with your fans.
Tell you what, $150 billion sub industry, that's pretty stout. But with Mike Robichaud involved and Sports Biz and every other entity to try to stay one step ahead of the curve, the business is in damn good hands. Mike, thank you very much.
Thanks, Rick. Great seeing you.
Sports Professor Rick Horrow, speak with you soon. Well, you see the thread that circulates all the way through all of these issues. It's sports sponsorship at a macro level. Hopefully, Mike Robichaud provided some perspective in the years and decades ahead. How about the 5 to watch for the next couple of weeks? Number 1 through 5. Number 1, the Premier League, by the way, the regular season, lower numbers than ever before, at least in the last couple of years. 510,000 viewers on average. People say that it's not as big as it has been before. NBC points to the fact that Liverpool basically ran away and hid from everybody else. Man U, Tottenham, Crystal Palace, Fulham. Everybody 4 weeks out understood that the race was over. Other than that, though, nevertheless, NBC reaches 17 billion game minutes viewed, second highest ever. What it means is there may have been less people watching, but they stayed for a long time and will continue to watch as we get through the championship season, the FIFA Club World Cup coming up in the next couple of weeks. We'll see what happens as the top clubs come over to the U.S. for basically a dry run and a practice for next year's World Cup. That's number 1. Number 2, The Panthers are about to set the NHL mark for games played in a 3-year span. Game 1, they tie Dallas, 1997 and 2000, Detroit, 2006 through 2009. Gustav Forsling, Sam Reinhart have appeared in 303 of those games, will break the record. And by the way, Edmonton breaks their record of their 300th game in the past 3 years once Game 1 happens. Game 1 independently, very significant. The series, how about the rematch? Everybody focusing on Panthers dynasty, Sun Belt strategy. Does the Canadian team get the win? Great storylines all above. Let the NHL Finals begin. That's number 2. Number 3, fewer TV audience numbers for the Fever without Caitlin Clark, but 357,000 viewers. But it's the 10th largest viewing in WNBA history, even without Caitlin Clark. As she goes through 2 more weeks of recovery, including a national TV game on CBS with the Fever, everybody wants to know, does her impact transcend her as the Fever continues to generate significant numbers and significant impact? We'll just have to see. That's number 3. Number 4, the FBI reportedly investigating NFL and NBA Player Association and individual players about the strategy and impact and behavior of one-team partners. Valued at about $2 billion in 2022, Redbird Capital sells its 40% stake, but they've come under scrutiny before. In late 2024, an anonymous unfair labor practices complaint filed with NLB and National Labor Relations Board. No expectation of what the comparison would be in this situation, but let's watch that over the next few weeks. And then number 5, Monumental Sports and Entertainment, the Leonsis creative arm, cuts an extension of their deal with DXC Technology. Their 6-year partnership focuses on the ultimate $800 million transformation of Capital One Arena. Remember, not too long ago, where they were going down to Virginia with the governor of the Youngkin administration, trying to put together the deal in the southern part of the DMV. Didn't happen. $800 million digital transformation, multiple event opportunities, AI to, here's a new term, future-proof all arena operations at Capital One Arena. And the Sports Business Journal Inside the Industry show and other ideas will be generated from the newly renovated arena because of the partnership. Look for that to dominate the headlines in the years ahead. That's it for this show. Thank you for the 5 to watch. Also, thank Mike Robichaud for his perspective on the industry as we go forward. Big weeks and months ahead. We will cover it prolifically. Sports Fester Rick Horrow, thank all of you for listening and watching. Thank Kali Kazar for helping us put this podcast together. Look for more over the spring and summer on a weekly basis. $1.3 trillion industry, the sports business. Thanks for everybody for watching. Sports Professor Rick Horrow, speak with you soon.